Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. In this video, I thought of doing something a little bit different. Typically on my channel, I have videos about specific technology stacks and we go ahead and we try to learn these technology stacks. However, in this video, what I thought of doing is building a full stack application so we can combine our knowledge into a real production ready application. And this is more like the real world. And so that is exactly what we're going to be doing with this app over here. So this app is a fully pledged subscription application. So what you do here is you subscribe on a monthly basis. So you pay us money on a monthly basis to get specific articles. And these articles are meant to feed your mind. So you know, they're kind of like success articles and they help you grow as a person. So that's exactly what we are going to be building. So let's actually go through kind of a tour of what we're going to be building. The application on the surface might be really simple, but it's actually relatively complex and you're going to learn a lot as you go through this video. So let's go ahead and let's do that. So right now, this is the landing page and this is exactly what we see. So we see a login or a sign up page. All right, awesome. So of course, we're going to build this landing page. Now what we want to do is we want to sign up because we don't have an account yet. So let's go ahead and click sign up. We get this modal. Let me just zoom in on the modal here just in case you guys don't see it well. So over here you have this modal. And if you try to sign up with, invalid credentials, we have this error handling system. So you can see here that, if we have an invalid email, if I were to put, some invalid email as well as a password, we get that error. Now if I were to, let's just change this to a meaningful email like harblaith@hotmail.com. And then if I were to go ahead and change this maybe to a password that is very short, if I were to try to sign up, we get another error. And this error is actually handled inside of our backend and it's relayed to us inside of our front end. So let's actually go ahead and let's put a meaningful password that is, greater than 5 characters long. And now once we sign up, and let me just zoom out of here a bit. So once we sign up, we get redirected to this page right over here. So this shows us all of our articles. Now, right now, as soon as you sign up, you don't have any plans. So you get redirected to this page. So you don't have any plans. And then, well, it redirects us to buy a plan. So we're going to go ahead and now you can see the different types of plans that we can get. We can get a premium plan. We can get a standard plan. We can do a basic plan. Again, let me zoom in here for you guys a bit. This kind of looks kind of stale, but I don't really want to focus on the CSS. You guys get the point. You guys can make this a lot prettier and actually include the stuff that you would get at basic, premium, and standard. So basically the premise of this is you buy a plan and then you get access to articles. So there are premium articles, there's also standard articles, and then there's basic articles. If you order the premium package, you get every single article, whether it's standard or basic. If you get the standard package, you get all the standard articles and the basic articles, but not the premium. And I'm assuming you guys know what you'll get with the basic, just the basic articles. So let's say I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to buy the standard plan. This is going to be $10 a month. So I'm going to go ahead and press buy now. And then what this does is it actually redirects us to a real life, and this is absolutely true, payout. So this is our payout session. And we can go ahead and enter our credentials. So over here, this is in test mode, so we can just add some test credit card. So 424242 is a default credit card for Stripe, and that's the thing that we're using. And let's just do 2222 2222. Then over here we can do Lathe Harb. Let's add a postal code of this. I think that will work. And then now what we can do is we can subscribe to this plan. So once we subscribe to this plan, everything is all fine. Now we get to see our articles. How amazing is that? So now you can see here, should you buy a house in Greece? I don't know if this is Greece or not, but I'm assuming it's Greece based on previous pictures that I've seen. And over here we have another article about, how to afford an expensive super dream car. Amazing articles that you would definitely want to pay $10 a month for. That's the premise of what I'm getting at here. But that's terrific. So this is exactly what we're going to be building. So we're going to be building an authentication system. We're also going to be building, how we can handle payments, subscription payments, how we can show different people different things depending on their payment. So this is going to be a full stack application, and we'll talk about the stack exactly in the next section. But for now, I just wanted to give you a quick little tour. Now, one other thing is that, of course, you can log out. Let me just zoom in here. You can see here that we have this logout option in our nav. Now I'm going to zoom right out. So if you do log out, notice that once I log out, that portion of the nav is completely gone. And if I try to go back to the articles page, and this is the page where we have our articles, and we click on articles, you can see here it doesn't allow us because we're not logged in. We need to be logged in to do that. So again, we can either sign up or log in. Let's go back over here. I'm already forgetting the email that I used. I think it was this hotmail.com. And of course, we can go ahead here and log right back in. We should see our articles. Then remember, this is our plan. If, however, I were to log out and sign up for another one, let's just say Lath, or you know what, let's just say somebody a lot cooler than Lath, LeBron James, at hotmail.com, and let's just give this a password. So LeBron just signed up. Now you can see that he doesn't have a plan. So even though he's authenticated and the other person had a plan, we know that this person doesn't have a plan, so he can go ahead and buy a plan. And he can, let's say, buy the premium plan because he's LeBron James. He can afford it. And then let's go here. Let's enter some test data. Let's go here. I'm pretty sure that won't work. Let's do 424242. 222222222. We can say LeBron. And this is in test mode, so none of this information is real. Let's just do this. And let's go ahead and subscribe here. And once LeBron subscribes, you can see now he gets an extra article. So happiness is an illusion, so don't pursue it. I don't know. That's just some deep, deep article, deep title of an article that I thought of. I don't know if it's true or not, but so don't take my word for it. But the premise is you get articles. The more you pay, you get more articles. I'm not saying the articles are good. They're actually pretty terrible, probably. Okay, so this is what we are going to be building, and let's just talk about exactly how we're going to be building this. And let's do that in the next section. In the last section, we looked at exactly what we're going to be building. In this section, we're going to look at the tools that we're going to utilize to build this app. Now, this is going to be a full stack application, and I do expect you to know the basics of how to build full stack applications. So I do expect you to know what a front end is, what the purpose of a back end is, as well as a little bit about databases. You don't have to be experts, but I do expect you to know this. Now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be building a MERN application. So MERN essentially is an abbreviation for a bunch of different tools that we can utilize to build full stack applications. So for the front end, we're going to be using React. This is by far one of the most popular front end libraries for building web applications. And so that is exactly what we're going to be doing. We're going to be building React. And I do expect you to know at least the basics of React, how to utilize React. So, components, routers. I do expect you to know a little bit about React. Now for the backend, we're going to be utilizing Node and Express. Now Express is a library that's built on top of Node, and it allows us to create these APIs that we're going to utilize to interact with our front end. For this, I do expect you to know at least the basics of what an API is. You don't have to know exactly how to utilize Express, but understand what an API is and how to utilize it. And then lastly, we're going to be using MongoDB as our database. I don't think you need any database knowledge for this because databases are relatively simple to understand in the beginning, so they're just the places where we're going to be storing our data, so storing and retrieving data. So you don't really need to know a lot about MongoDB to take this course. But this is the MERN stack because we're using MongoDB for our database, so M, E, and N are for Express and Node, and then R is for React. So this is the MERN stack, and we can use these technologies to build full stack applications. Now, here's the thing. I'm also going to sprinkle in some other technologies that we're going to be utilizing. We're not going to be utilizing JavaScript for this course at all. Instead, we're going to be utilizing TypeScript. TypeScript is just the way of the modern web at the moment, and almost every new application will be utilizing TypeScript. So if you don't know TypeScript, this is going to be a good opportunity to understand it and learn it. And I don't expect you to understand TypeScript. When we utilize TypeScript things, I'll try to explain it in as much detail as possible, just so I can show you exactly what's going on. But this could be very good for you guys because TypeScript is just the way that the modern web is going. So we're going to be utilizing TypeScript, and then we're going to be utilizing this wonderful technology called Stripe. So Stripe is actually a multi-billion-dollar company. Anytime you probably purchase something online, you're giving a little bit to Stripe. This is a great company for adding that payment session that we just saw, and it's really just, it deals with everything payment. So we're going to be utilizing Stripe to get that subscription payment plan inside of our application. So that is the main stack. There's also going to be a little bit of small libraries here and there, but they're not really worth mentioning. All right, so that is the stack, and let's just get right into coding. Let's get started with building our application. Now, the first thing that we need to do in order to do this is to create a directory where our application code is going to live. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to desktop, and I'm going to create a new folder. And you can call this folder whatever it is that you want. However, this is the folder that we're going to be utilizing to build our application. Now, I already did this, and it's called sub app. But if you don't have one, go ahead and create a directory for your application. This is where the client, the React app, is going to live, as well as the Express Node application, which is going to be our server. So the next step is we're going to go ahead and we're going to open up our terminal or our command prompt if you're on Windows. And then we're going to move into that directory. So you're going to move into your desktop if you have your directory in your desktop directory. And then you're going to move into that app directory. And then you're going to execute a command to create your React application. And in order to do this, you need to have Node installed. So I'm assuming you have Node installed. If you don't, go ahead to the Node landing page and download it. It's a relatively easy download. So in order to create your client, which is your React app, we're going to do npx create React app. So we're going to do npx create React app. But we also have to specify that we are going to be utilizing TypeScript inside of this React application. So to specify that, we're going to say --template, and then we're going to say TypeScript. And then we're going to call our React app whatever name we want. Well, I'm going to give it just a name of client. So go ahead and execute this command. I already did, so I'm not going to execute it again. But what this should create is a directory called client inside of this sub app directory. And this is going to be, well, our client. So let's actually go ahead over here and let's open up VS Code or whatever text editor you choose. I highly recommend VS Code. Let's go open, and then let's go to our desktop, and then let's find our sub app. And now let's go ahead and open that up. And you can see here now we have this client. So we have this client, and this is again our React application, and it is built in TypeScript. So if I were to zoom in here a little bit, usually this would be app.js or JSX. With TypeScript, it is .tsx all the time, standing for, well, TypeScript. So right now, this seems like just normal JavaScript code, and that's completely fine. JavaScript or TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript, so this is actually completely fine. But you know, there's additional superpowers that we're going to be utilizing with TypeScript. So yeah, so that's our client. Now that we got that up and running, let's actually build out that hero that we saw over here. So let's go to our landing page. So let's go to our landing page, or you know what, we can just log out. Let's log out and let's just quickly build this hero that we see. So this is going to be relatively simple. This is just to get our hands dirty with React. Let's get our hands dirty and start coding out our application. Right now we created our client, and the first thing that I want to do is I want to open up my integrated terminal, and I'm going to move into that client directory. So I'm going to do cd client. And then I'm going to do an npm run start in order to start up my React application. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's just wait a little bit here so we can wait patiently, and there we go. We should see our React app is, well, at least, well, now it's up and running. Awesome. You can see here that our source code is the app.tsx, which is awesome. Okay, so what do we want to do at this point? Well, right now, I think it'd be nice to first work on the landing page of our application. The landing page is made up of two components. Remember, in React, everything is really split up into components. So right here at the very top, you might not be able to see it, but we have this nav bar component. You can see here, if I were to just quickly zoom in, you can see here we have home, and that's really the only option. So that is what we are going to create. We're going to need to create this nav bar component, and then over here, we're going to have to create this hero. So let's begin with the nav bar component. This is going to be probably the easier one, and then over here, this is going to be a little bit harder, but still relatively easy. So let's begin with the nav bar component. So the first thing that we need to do is go to our app.tsx. Let's close this down. We don't need that anymore. And let's just zoom in a little bit. And let's just get rid of everything inside of the header. So we're going to get rid of everything inside of the header, including the header as well. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to build out the nav component. Now, of course, we can build this out inside of the app.tsx, but that's not very organized. So what we're going to do instead is go to the source directory. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a components directory. So we're going to create a components directory. And then in here, we're going to create another directory called nav, because we're going to have a nav component. And then inside of the nav component, we're going to create a file called nav.tsx. So over here, now what we can do is create our function-based component. So we can say something like navbar is equal to an arrow function. And then what we can do here is very simply just return, and just for now, let's just return a nav element that says home inside. So very, very simple. And then let's go all the way in the bottom over here, and let's just do an export default navbar. All right, cool. So over here now what we can do is we can go inside of this div and we can do navbar. And as you can see, as you start typing it, a cool thing is that it's going to auto import it for us. So you can see here it auto imported. And we can close off this component. And if you were to refresh, you see here that we have our navbar. So you can see here we have it. Now it's all centered in the middle. Probably not all too great. And the reason for this is because of this class over here. So let's just completely get rid of this class. And then let's also go to our CSS and just get rid of all of these styles, the app.css. All right, so now over here you can see now it's in the left corner. I'm not going to zoom in because it's not very interesting. Okay, cool. So now let's go ahead and of course we want to create a component like this. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, there's multiple approaches. We can build out this component and style it ourselves, but I think a better approach for us at the moment is to use a library to create our components. Now, there's multiple different libraries out there for building out React components, and they're really just pre-built React components. For example, there's Material UI, there's a bunch. Honestly, off the top of my head, I can't really think of other ones other than Material UI or the one that we're going to be using, and that is React Bootstrap. So we're going to be utilizing React Bootstrap in order to build out a lot of our different components. So for example, if I need an alert, you can see here that we can get this right over here, this UI with this code right here. We have this alert component that we can import from React Bootstrap, and we get an li like this. Now what we want is a navbar. So what we can do is we can go to the nav section, and I would like a navbar that kind of looks a little something like this. And what I would need to do is import these things over here, just copy these styles, and I would be able to do that. So let's go ahead and let's install React Bootstrap. Now in order to install React Bootstrap, let's go to the React Bootstrap landing page. And then we're going to go to get started. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to do this command. we're going to do an npm install react bootstrap. So let's just copy that. We're not going to install Bootstrap itself because we're going to use a CDN for this, but we're going to just utilize React Bootstrap. So let's go here and let's go to our terminal and let's open up a new terminal window. Let's make sure that we're inside of our client directory, and let's just do an npm install react bootstrap. Awesome, let's just wait. Okay. So now what we can do as we wait, we can go to our nav component and then we can write out this code. So if you go back to what we had here, we can write out code that is similar to this. So we can copy this, but in case you guys are not inside of the documentation, I'm just going to go ahead and type it out. So what we're going to do is we're going to get a few things from this React Bootstrap. What am I doing here? Not const, import. So we're going to get a few things from this React Bootstrap library that we just installed. And remember, this is going to give us a bunch of components. So we're going to use the navbar component. We're going to take the nav item component. And we're also going to ask for the nav link components. And there we go. So navbar, nav item, and nav link. Now right away we have an issue, and you can see here that it's yelling at us. So if I were to hover over it, you can see here that TypeScript is telling us that, hey, there's import declaration errors. Now the issue is, right now we're importing a component called navbar, and now our own component is called navbar. So maybe we can just fix this by simply just calling this nav instead. So we can just call this nav instead of navbar, and now we don't have any issues. All right, cool. So now what we can do is let's go here and let's say navbar, and then we're gonna have a nav item. So a nav item, and then inside of this nav item, we're gonna have a nav link. So we're gonna have a nav link, and then inside of this nav link, we're just gonna have home. So we're just gonna have home. And that's pretty much it for now. And that's really all we need. So now what we can do is let's go back to our page. And if I were to refresh, you can see that it's not really looking quite right. It's not really looking any different. And the reason for this is that, yes, we imported and we installed React Bootstrap, but what this does is give us a bunch of components with CSS classes. What we also need to do is import in those CSS classes, and we get that from Bootstrap itself. So what we can do here is go to get started. Now we can either install Bootstrap and then add it inside of our CSS, or what we can do is very simply use the CSS CDN. So we can basically copy this link right over here. Then we can go to our public index.html. And then right in here, what we can do is we can paste in that link. So let's go ahead and let's paste that in. And then now you can see here, it looks a little bit different. You can see that there's a little bit of padding, you know, it just looks different. So just take my word for it. But now it works because remember, with React Bootstrap, right now what we're getting, so over here, with React Bootstrap, these are just a bunch of pre-built component with CSS classes that conform to the Bootstrap library. So that's good. That's exactly what we're getting with this. However, we need those classes, those Bootstrap classes, and we can get that by putting the CDN inside of our index.html. I hope that makes sense. All right, so that is the navbar. Now the next step is to create the hero. So let's go over here inside of our client. Let's close the public. Let's go here and let's create another directory. And we want to create another directory called hero with a file inside of it called hero.tsx. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the file, even though we're creating a directory with a file inside it. So I'm going to click on the file. And in order to create a directory with a file inside it, what we can do is we can do hero, and then we can do slash hero.tsx. And what this is going to do is going to create a hero directory, and inside of that directory is going to create this file. So you can see that's exactly what happened. So let's go to our nav and let's just copy everything we have here. And let's just paste that into our hero.tsx. And let's just get rid of this for now. Let's call this hero. And let's call this just have a div, and we can export the hero. All right, cool. That's awesome. So now what we can do is right over here, let's actually go ahead and let's import hero and put it inside of our app. So now we should have the nav bar, and we should also have that hero. Yeah, we do have the hero, but there's no text inside it. Now there is. Okay, cool. That is terrific. So of course now we need to make it look like what we had before or what we have over here. And so in order to do that, let's go back over here and let's think about the stuff that we're going to utilize in order to make this hero. So to do this, we're going to utilize, of course, React Bootstrap, as well as we're going to utilize some of our own components that we are going to style. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to style our own components. And of course, what we can do is just have divs with class names and then put them inside of our CSS. But what I prefer to utilize is something called React styled components. And it's really simple. If you don't know what it is, it's really, really simple to understand and learn. Why is this on Yahoo? Let's go to Google. Let's go here, React styled components. Let's go here. And this is a terrific library for creating styled components. So for example, let me just quickly zoom in here. Let's say you want to create an H1 that has a font size of 1.5 ems, a text align center, and this color. What you can do is you can do something like this. You can do this syntax. Zoom out here. You can do this syntax, and then what you can do is you can get this title and treat it like a component. And I really like that, so that's exactly what we're going to be utilizing to style our own custom components. All right, cool. So in order to do this, what we have to do is we have to go to our terminal, and we need to do other installation. Now make sure that you're in your client directory for this. And what we're going to do is we're going to import we're going to install styled components. So we're going to npm install styled components. And we get this from the docs, from the installation docs, right over here. So styled components, okay? All right, cool. So now what we're going to do is we're going to utilize styled components. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to create a hero component that is going to encompass our whole hero. So let's go here, and what we're going to do, in order to create that styled component, we have to import styled from styled components. So styled components. Now you might be seeing this error. Actually, most of you guys will be seeing this error. And the reason for this is because we are utilizing TypeScript. If we weren't utilizing TypeScript, this would be completely fine. So the issue that's happening here is that for each library that we install, we also have to install the types if they're not associated with the library already. And in this case, the types aren't associated with this library, so we need to install these types as well. So let's go over here to our terminal again, and let's make sure that we're inside of our client. Now, in order to install the types, we can just simply do npm install, and then the library, but before the library, we do @types and then /. And that way we get the types of this library. Okay, there we go. Cool. So now it's working all fine and dandy. All right, so let's actually utilize this React styled components. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create the hero. So let's just call this the hero component. So we're going to say the hero component is equal to styled, and then we do dot, and then over here, so we do styled dot, and then we do whatever HTML element we want this component to be. In this case, I want this component to be a header. So we want it to be a header. Now it can be whatever. It could be a P tag, or it could be an H1. It could be whatever. And what's cool about TypeScript, if you put something that doesn't really exist, it yells at you. And that's exactly why we installed those types. So now we can just say .header. And then now we created this element with a header, but of course we want to add CSS to it. So now what we can do is we can do backticks, and then inside of the backticks we can add our CSS. How cool is that? So in here, what we're gonna do is we're gonna add, for example, let's just add a background color just so we can see how this works. So background color, we'll remove this later, but let's just do pink. And now what we can do is, instead of utilizing this div, we can utilize this header component, and we can save that. And if we were to go to here, you can see that now it is nice and styled. All right, cool. And that's why I really like this. This is a really cool library to create these styled components. So of course I don't want a pink background, but let's give it some padding on the top. So let's give it 5 rems on the top, 0 from the left and right. Let's also give it a height of 60 VH. And then just so we can really see it, let's go over here and also give it that background color again of the lovely color of pink. All right, cool. So this is awesome. This is exactly what I want. Except I want this image right over here to be the background of this hero, not the pink. So in order to do this, what we can do is we can go to a very popular website called Unsplash. And that's exactly where I grabbed this image. And you can grab whatever image you want, preferably an image that is longer, that is wider than it is longer, I guess, or wider than it is tall or whatever. You can pick whatever one you want. I'm trying to quickly figure out where I found this image. I might not be able to. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to this page, and I am probably not even going to be able to inspect it because it's Safari. You know what? Let's just pick a random image from here. So let's find a good image and we'll just utilize that. So good image. What's a nice image for telling people how successful? I don't know, let's just write here success or something. Okay. Oh, this looks really cool. Let's pick this one. So let's click on this image, let's right click it, and then let's do copy image address. And so what we want to do is we want the background color to be this image right over here. And so let's go here, and then what we can do here, instead of background image or background color, we can simply do background image. And then we can say URL, and we can say that the URL is the URL that we just pasted. And so now what we can do is, well, you know what, it's looking kind of decent. Doesn't look that bad. We can go over here to maybe fix some of the alignment. We can just do background size. You can say cover. So we can fix that. I would like it to be a little bit more to the top. So let's do a background alignment, and let's do top, or maybe let's do bottom. Never really know how this works. Background alignment is not really working the way that I want it to. Background, let's go over here to background alignment just to see if I'm doing it correctly or not. So it says here you can do, it's called background position, not alignment. Oh, okay. So let's copy this. Let's do background position center. And there we go. Okay, this looks pretty good. Honestly, whatever. This looks fine. Okay, cool. So we got that part done. Let's also get rid of this extra stuff. All right, cool. So I like this so far. Maybe later on we can change the image if I don't like it. I actually kind of prefer this one a little bit better. I'll probably eventually change it to this one once I can figure out what the URL for that image is. I just really don't know how to inspect things inside of Safari. I'm right clicking and I just never use Safari, but I'll probably change it to that image. I don't really like this one to be particular, but that's okay. We'll work with it for now. Okay, so cool. So now we have created our wonderful hero component. Now in here, what we're gonna do is we're gonna add a container, because what we want to do is we want to have our content more or less centered right over here. So what we can do is from React Bootstrap, we can import container. So we can over here go React Bootstrap and we can import container. Just to quickly show you what this does, I'm just gonna add some gibberish. And if you look closely, if I zoom in here, you can see the gibberish right here. But if I were to put this inside of a container, that container that we got from React Bootstrap, you can see that now it's a little bit more to the right. So the container is just, it makes sure that everything is not, that it's not, you know, all the way to the left. It's kind of more in the center. All right, cool. So the next thing that I want to add is the header. So right over here, if I were to go to this, we have this really cool kind of header right over here that says, you know, feed your mind as well as the success. So I want to create this right now. So I'm going to call this a header container. So let's go over to our code and let's do header container. And then we're going to do that's equal to styled. And then in here, we're going to give this a little bit of styling. So let's give it a background color, and this is going to be a green background color. Let's give it an RGB of 5148 and then 1112. Let's also give it a padding of 3 rems. We'll also give it a color of white, and then we're going to give it a width of 32.5 rems. So now what we can do is we can actually utilize this. So let's go here and let's go in here and let's actually put that in there. So now we get something that completely fails. I wonder why that is. Oh, of course, we have to specify exactly what this is. So we can say that this is a div. All right, awesome. So we have that in there. But of course, now we want the actual content in here rather than just an empty random green box. So let's add our content. So of course, we want the header. That's the first thing that we want, or the heading. So we're going to say something like heading, and that's going to be equal to styled. That's going to be an H1. Now we're very simply, all we're going to do is we're going to give it a font size of 5 rems. So let's go here and let's get rid of that. And what we're going to say in here is feed your mind with the best. All right. Okay. It's looking a little bit closer to what we have here. All right. So now we want the subheading. So let's go ahead and let's create another component called subheading. And that's going to be style dot, and we're going to give this an H3. And over here, let's give it a margin of 1 rem, top and bottom, and then 0 left and right. And then we're going to give it a font weight of 400. Save that. Let's go here. And let's create this subheading. Now inside of this subheading, we're going to have some stuff in here. So we're going to say, you know, grow, learn, and become more successful by reading some of the top articles by highly reputable individuals. How do you spell that? Individuals. So let's save that. And now we get this. All right, cool. That's awesome. And it's actually kind of looking quite decent with the background actually. So the last thing that we need to create are these buttons. So these buttons right over here. But this is gonna be a little bit tougher because of course when you click these buttons, you have modals that appear. So let's actually take a break and let's do that in the next section. Alright, my good friends, in this section, we're going to create the buttons that are going to trigger the modal to appear. So for example, over here, when we click the login, we get the login modal. When we click sign up, we get the sign up modal. So this is going to be actually relatively easy, mainly because of the React Bootstrap library that we installed. If we were to go to components, we can scroll all the way down, go to modal. And then what we can see here is we can see the markup for creating a modal. So we can see here launch demo modal, and that's pretty much exactly what we want. So let's go ahead and let's kind of copy this code into our application to create the modal. So let's go over here and we're going to create another component. So we're going to go over here, we're going to say modal and then /modal.tsx. Then we're going to go ahead and open that up, and let's go ahead and in here we're going to create our modal, of course. So we can call this something like const modal component, because we're going to import something called modal from React Bootstrap. And then we can just say that this is an arrow function, and we'll return something a little bit later. Okay, cool. And then let's also go ahead here and let's just do an export default of modal component. Modal, oh my goodness, modal component, please. This. All right, so in here, what we're gonna need to do is we're gonna need to import some things from React Bootstrap. So let's go over here and we're going to, from React Bootstrap, we're going to import, from React Bootstrap, we're gonna import modal. So there's a component called modal. We're also going to import a component called button input group as well. So inside of the modal, we have to think about exactly what we're going to be adding. We're going to be adding these input forms, so email and password for both login and sign up. And so we need to create, we need to get the components to create those as well. So we're going to say input group, and then we're going to say form control. So those are the components that we're going to take a look at. Just for references, these ones again are going to be used to create the input. You can always go to the documentation over here, search for input or something like that, or maybe search for form. Let's see, yeah, forms, and you can see how they do things over here. So they have a form group, and then they also have inputs as well. All right, cool. So in here, what we're going to very simply do is we're going to go ahead and we are going to return. And what we're going to return is a fragment. So a fragment is basically something, it's basically just JSX that it's an element that doesn't really exist. So if you know React, you need to have one root element and then everything else nested inside of it. However, sometimes you might want to have, you know, two elements side by side, and you don't want to add like a real element like a div. So instead, what you can use is a fragment to kind of get around this rule that we have to follow. All right, so in here, the first thing that we're going to add is the button. Now, the button is the thing that we are going to click in order for the modal to appear. So we're going to go over here. We're going to say button. And for now, we'll just leave the button as is. We can also give it some props. We can give it like size of whatever size we want. But for now, we'll just leave it as is. And for now, we'll just say sign up, even though we're going to make this dynamic to be either sign up or login a little bit later. So that's the button. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to utilize that modal component. All right, so we're going to have that modal component. Now in here, we can have whatever it is that we want. And so now what we need to do is when we click this button, what we want to do is we want to actually show this modal component. So what we can do here is we can actually have some state. So we can do import from React. And we can import useState from React. So we can say useState. And then right over here, what we can have, so right here, we can have const show and then set show. So this is whether we want to either show or not show the component. And that could be equal to use state. And initially we can set this as false because we don't want to show our component initially. And we can have also some handlers over here called handle close, handle show. So over here we can have handle close. And then this, what it can do is it can basically set show to false. And then over here we can have another, which is handle show. And then this can set show to true. So we can use these handlers if you want to, close or open this modal. All right, so now what we want to do is when we click this button, so on click, what we want to do, so on click, what we want to do is we want to invoke handle show because we want to show the modal. So let's go here, handle show. And then over here, what we need to do is we need to pass in that show prop. So this is a built-in prop from the React Bootstrap modal component. And this is going to be show, which is going to either be a Boolean or true or false Boolean. And then we're going to say also, we're going to pass in an on hide. And then on hide, we're going to do handle close. This is basically just based off the documentation. And I think that's pretty much really all we need in order to get our modal up and running. So let's actually give it a go. Let's go to our hero. And then inside of our hero, we're going to have that modal component. So let's go inside of the subheading. And then inside of this subheading, what we want to do is we want to display that modal component. So let's go ahead, modal component, and let's just pretty much close it off. So now if we were to go here, and let's do a quick refresh, you can see here that we get this button, and if we were to click it, we get this modal. So it works, and we can actually click away, and everything seems fine and dandy. All right, cool. The only issue is the styling is a little bit terrible. So let's fix the styling. So let's go to our modal, and inside of the modal, of course, we want to fix the styling because the styling just completely sucks. So inside of this modal component, let's create a modal header. And what this modal header basically is well, it's a header. It's going to tell us exactly what this modal is for. So let's go here. And to utilize the modal header, we can use that exact same modal component, and then we just do dot header. All right, awesome. And then in here, we can do another thing we can get from modal, and that's the modal title. And over here, we can simply say sign up. And now if we were to open this up, you can see it looks a lot better. All right, just give me a quick second, guys. I have to charge my Sorry, my laptop is about to die. I have to go ahead and charge it. And all right, there we go. It's charged. Awesome. Sorry about that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. All right, cool. So now we have this sign up. So that's the header. Now let's create the body. So as you can imagine, to create the body, we're going to do modal.body. And again, if this is all confusing, this is just really based off of the React Bootstrap documentation. So we're going to go ahead, do modal.body. And then in here, inside of the body, we are going to want to have this input right over here. So let's go ahead, and based on the documentation, what we need to do is utilize input group. So we're going to say input group, close that off. And then we're going to do in here, input group text. Let's go in here, input group dot text. All right, close that off. And then in here, the first thing we're gonna have is the email. So we're gonna have the email in here. So save that. And then of course, what we want is we want that form. So we can say form control for this. And then we can close this off. And we can say that this is of type email. So we can say type email. All right, so if we were to save this, and were to click on this again, you can see this is exactly what we get. Now we can copy this exact thing for the password. So we can say here type password, and then we can say that this input group text is password. All right, cool. So looks kind of hideous, to be quite honest. So let's give it a little bit of margin. So let's go here to the input group. Let's give it a class. We're gonna give it a margin bottom of 3, MB3, which signifies a margin bottom of 3. And let's do that exact same thing over here. Okay, that looks a lot better to me. It's looking exactly like what we had before. So we're done with the body. And now what we want to do is we want to create the footer. So let's go here and let's create this footer. All right, and then inside of this footer, we're gonna have a button. So a button component, and we're gonna give this button component a variant of secondary. And this is basically just some styling that Bootstrap has inherently. So we're gonna give it secondary. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna say that this is a close button. So on click, what we want to do is very simply just handle close. So we want to call that handle close function. Now let's go over here and let's create another button. And then in this button, we're gonna call this primary. This button is called primary. And this button for now, we're not gonna have any on click. We're gonna create that a little bit later. But right now, for here, we're gonna call this sign up. Sign up, or honestly, whatever it is it whether it's login or sign up. All right, so, okay, there we go. It's looking kind of good actually. So you can see here that it's looking really nice. So now what we need is we need another button for the login process. And to be quite honest, I don't want to create another modal. I think because the login and the sign up modals they contain both just the email and the password, what we can do is just very simply pass some data in, and it can just dynamically change whether it's login or log out, or login or sign up. So what we can do is we can actually reuse this by passing in some props. And what I mean by that is what we can do is we can go to this hero that's rendering this component. And then inside of this hero, we can pass some data inside of it, telling the component, the modal component, exactly what it is that we want. So for example, maybe we want to pass in the text. So we want to pass in the text, and we want this to be sign up. Whereas if I were to create this other component, I'm gonna want this to be login. So login. So this is what we want to do. And then of course, inside of our modal, we want to get this text and then render dynamically. Now the only issue is right now, if this was plain old JavaScript, it would be completely fine. However, this is not JavaScript. Of course, we're using TypeScript for this. And so what we need to do is we need to define the prop types that we're gonna get inside of our modal. And that's exactly why we're getting this error over here. So if I were to actually save this, our whole application would crash because we're having some TypeScript issues. So we need to define the props that we're gonna get inside of this modal component. Now the best way to define the props is by using an interface. So you can say something like modal props, and then we can say that this is an object, and then the props, we're gonna have text, and then this text is gonna be a string. So in here, what we can do is we can define that, well, we're gonna get back these props, which is text string, from the hero component. And you can see that now it's completely happy. And now over here, I can just take the text right out. So over here, I can simply utilize the text. And then maybe also over here, I can utilize this text. So I think that's pretty much it. So now, as you can see, if I were to refresh this, I'm getting 2 signups for some reason. Let's refresh that. Refresh. I don't think refreshing is gonna, okay. Also over here, we hard-coded sign up. So let's save that. All right, so now you can see here, if I were to just zoom in quickly, we have sign up as well as login. All right, cool. Now another thing I want to do is I want to, of course, maybe change the color of this a little bit. The color is quite small, so let's go over here. Let's pass in some more data. So we're gonna say the variant for this, or did I say the color was small? The color is just, they're both primary and I don't want them to be primary. So the first variant is gonna be primary, and then the second variant is going to be secondary. And now what we can do is we can save that. We need to, of course, here define that we're going to be passing in some variants. Now what we can do is we can define that this is going to be a string, but really this is just going to be a particular set of strings. So it's either going to be primary, secondary, or whatever real Bootstrap classes accept. We can't put any gibberish in here. So it actually might be good to specifically define what the strings are going to be. So we can say here that this is going to be primary or secondary. And if you want to use other different types of variants, we can of course pass them in over here. So now what we can do is we can get that variant, and then in here, inside of the button, or inside of this button right here, we can simply say variant is equal to the variant that is passed. So variant is equal to variant that is passed. And just to show you how like significant this is over here, what we can do, if I were to type in any other string, it would yell at me eventually. Yes, right here. So you can see here, it's yelling at me, it's saying that no, this is not a valid variant. All right, so if we were to save this, we have this. Honestly, this isn't really beautiful. So what we can do here is instead call this danger. Danger is what I wanted, not secondary. So save that. Now it's going to yell at us because that's not an acceptable variant. So we can say here or danger. So let's go ahead and save that. And if you were to refresh, okay, cool. And let's go ahead and let's just make the size of this a little bit bigger. So let's go here. Let's say size large, just to make it a little bit bigger. And of course, what I want to do is I want to add a little bit of margin because they're just cramped up next to one another. So let's add some margin in here. So what we can do is very simply just add some styles. We'll just do inline styles for this. You can just do margin right, and we can just say 1 rem. Save that, and okay, this is looking kind of good. Maybe we can also add some padding. Maybe, I don't know, what could this be? We can say something like, let's say 1 rem top and bottom, and then 4 rems left and right. Let's see, this is just, okay, that's humongous. Let's do 0.75, and then let's do 3 rems here. That's still kind of big. Let's maybe make it a little bit smaller. Okay, that looks really good to me, actually. All right, cool. So now you can see here that now we have the sign up for this. And then over here, we have login for this. All right, cool. This is terrific. And that is the modals. And now we're pretty much done our landing page. So our landing page is up and running. Now the next step is actually to make things functional. Now that we got our landing page up and running, it's working, let's start getting into some of the more fun and challenging bits of this application. Specifically, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be really adding authentication to our application, because right now there is no authentication. Of course, when you click on this, it asks you for the email and password, but when you click on sign up, it does nothing. So let's quickly talk about how we are going to be implementing authentication. So the authentication logic is not going to live in the front end, but rather it's going to live in the back end. As a quick refresher, what happens is your client, which is your front end, is going to make a request to your server, which is your back end. The server is going to process that request, interact with the database if need be, and then it's going to send back a response to the client. And this is exactly what we're going to be doing with our application. Our client is going to send a request to our server telling it, hey, this user wants to sign up. And specifically, it's going to give it the email and the password. The server then is going to perform a little bit of logic and then is going to return a response to the client. So let's actually talk about the logic that the server is going to create that we are going to be creating for this specific sign-up route. So let's go talk about that. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to validate the email and the password. So the client can go ahead and send us whatever email, whatever formatted email over here. So they can send us something like this, something, let me just zoom in here, something like this that is not really a valid email. And also they can give us a password that is extremely short, maybe 1 or 2 characters short. So the first thing that we need to do inside of our server is validate that the email is really an email and that the password is, well, of proper length. So that's the very first thing that we have to do. If this step is not passed, so this validation step is not passed, then we're going to omit all of the other steps and just simply respond to the client saying that, hey, I cannot create this user. I cannot sign up this user. The next thing is, and don't mind the animations, guys, I forgot to remove it. The next thing is we need to check if the email is not already in use. So there could be a person with lathharb@hotmail.com already inside of our database and is already using our account. So we can't duplicate emails. We have to make sure that the email is not already in use. If the email is in use, maybe we send back a response to the client saying that, hey, this email is already in use. You already have an account with this email. All right. The next step, if we pass these 2 validation steps, then what we want to do is we want to hash the password. I'll talk about this a little bit in more detail when we actually get to it, but you never want to store your password in plain text. So for example, if you provide me a password of, I don't know, cup holder, I'm just looking at a cup holder right now, that's the thing that I thought of. So if you provide me a password of cup holder, I don't want to store that password cup holder inside of my database. I want to do something to it, change it around, make it look more like gibberish, and then store it inside of my database. So the reason why I want to do that is because, if my database ever gets breached, well, at least nobody has the passwords in plain text. It's going to be a lot more difficult to figure out what the actual password is. So you want to hash the password, and then after that, we actually want to save the user to the database. So we're going to take the email, we're going to take the hashed password and actually save that in our database. And that is going to kind of almost say, okay, this guy is actually signed up and created an account with our application. And then the last thing is we need to send a token back to the client. And I'll talk about this step once we get to it. It's relatively complex and kind of hard to understand. So we'll just leave it as that. We're just going to send back a token to the client. And this is kind of signifying, okay, everything is successful. So that is the steps. Let's actually work on these 2 validation steps. They're probably the more easier ones, and then we'll work on the other ones later. So this logic is going to live inside of our server. So inside of the sub app, let's create another directory that's not in the client, that's in this root portion. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create a server directory. And so in here, what we're going to do is we're going to open up a new terminal window. We're going to move into the server and we're going to initialize a node application with npm init-y. All right, so now that we initialized it, let's install some of the dependencies. Now remember, we're going to be creating a express application. So let's just do an npm install express. So let's go ahead and do that. And now we should have inside of our package.json, we should have express. All right, so the next thing that we want to do is we're going to be working with TypeScript inside of this application. Again, TypeScript is really the way that the modern web is going, so I want you guys to be up to date. So we're going to install some dependencies here. The first thing that we want to do is install the types for express. So we're going to say @types express, and then we're going to say @types node as well. We're also going to install TypeScript itself, and we're also going to install this package called ts node dev. And what this is, oops, I forgot to add the flag. We also want to add the flag --save-dev because all these are development dependencies. Okay, so let's go ahead, and now you can see here we have these development dependencies. And I wanted to say here This package is going to allow us to run our TypeScript application inside of development. All right, cool. So now that we got that out of the way, let's create a source directory. So over here, we're going to create a source directory. And this source directory is where our code is going to live. So this is where all the TypeScript server logic is going to be. All right, so in here, let's create an index.ts file. So not JS, TS file. And this is where our Express app is going to live. This is going to be the root of our Express app. So let's go ahead and let's start, working with Express. So we're going to do import Express from Express. And then over here, what we're going to do is we're going to create a Express app. So to do that, we can say const app is equal to Express and invoke it. And then the last thing that we need to do is we need to listen at a particular port. So we can do app.listen, and then let's listen to port 5,000, or maybe even 5,001. You know what? Let's do 8,000. 880 is actually a very popular one. Okay, that was the last one. Sorry about that. And then we're gonna have a callback over here. We can simply say console.log, and then we can say, now listening. Let's get rid of this and this. Why not? Now listening to port 5,000 or 880. That's really all we need. So now let's actually try to get this application up and running. So in order to do that, let's go to our package.json and let's create a new script. And this script is going to be, start and then :dev. So we're going to start our application in development mode. All right. So in order to do this, the first thing that we need to do is initialize that this is a TypeScript project. So let's open up our terminal again. Let's go back to that terminal window. Let's do clear. And what we want to do is we want to do tsc and then init. And what this does is it initializes that this is a TypeScript project. You should be able to run this command because you installed this TypeScript package. But if that doesn't work, try to install this TypeScript package globally and then run this command. So let's go ahead here. Let's run that. And now what happens here is could not resolve the path init. Let's see here. Is it TypeScript -init? There we go. Sorry. So it's TypeScript -init, not init. And as you can see here, it creates a tsconfig.json file. And this is just a file where we can actually configure TypeScript to look for whatever it is that we want. But we need this in order to initialize our project. All right, cool. So that's the first thing that we need to do. The second thing that I really would like you to install is nodemon. So let's go over here and let's do an npm install nodemon and then add the -g flag for making everything globally. So install this, and what this is going to allow us to do is hot reload our application. I already did it, so I'm not going to do that. All right, cool. So now that we got that out of the way, let's go to our package.json. And then in here, what we're going to do is we're going to call nodemon, because remember, nodemon is going to run and hot reload our application. And we're going to say that we want nodemon to watch for every single TypeScript file that is inside of any directory that is from the root. So to do that, we can just say that, hey, any TypeScript file that is inside of any directory and it has the extension .ts. So again, any TypeScript file that is in any directory, that's exactly what we're saying here. So go into any directory, look for any files that have the extension .ts, and we want you to watch this file. And anytime any of these files change, we want you to hot reload. So that's exactly what we're going to do. And then what we're going to do is we're going to execute. So once this changes, so once there's code changes over here, what we want you to do is we want you to execute ts node, and then we want you to re-execute ts node, and then we want to specify the root file, which is the source.index.ts. All right, I hope that makes sense. Let's just kind of quickly go through that again. So we want node_mon. Node_mon, remember, is going to watch for any changes in any files. And of course, here we're specifying that we wanted it to look for TypeScript files. And then if there's any changes, we want it to execute ts node, and then over here, source.index.ts. So just rerun the root application. Okay, so let's go give that a go. And now if I were to run npm run start :dev. Okay, awesome. So our application or our server is up and running. So now what we can do is we can go to localhost 880. Let's go there. And you can see, if I were to zoom in here, you can see we get this. If you get this, that means everything is fine. So what we can do right now is go inside of our index.ts and actually create a route. So we can do something like app.get / and then we can do rec res. So rec is the request, res is the response. So we can do res.send hello world. And now if you were to refresh this, give it some time, we get hello world. All right, cool. So now we know that our server is up and running. Now let's create our sign up route. So instead of creating our routes here inside of this file, let's actually create a route file or route folder inside of our source directory. So this is where we're going to house most of our routes. Okay, cool. And so in here, we're going to have an auth.ts route. So we're going to go over here. We're going to create this auth.ts route. And then in here, we're going to use some very special expressed syntax. So let's go ahead and let's do it right now. So we're going to go in here and we're going to do import. And we're going to import something called router. And we're going to import that from Express, so from Express, and then we're going to say, so we're going to import, well actually, you know what, let's actually go ahead and import Express from Express. So we're going to import Express from Express, and then from Express, we're going to get something called router. So we're going to say express.router. We're going to go ahead and invoke this. And essentially with this, now what we can do is we can create multiple routes for this file and then just export this route out, and it should have all those routes for us. So we can do an export default and then over here router. And then what we can do is we can go in here now and we can just say auth routes, and we can get that from the routes / auth. So any routes that we create in here with router are going to be exported into our index.ts file. Right now, we're not doing anything with it, but later on, we're going to configure it so that we utilize those routes. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and save this. And now what we want to do is, well, we want to create a post request for signing up. So we can say router.post. And then what we're going to say is, well, we want to sign up. So we want to sign up. And then we're going to have an arrow function. Now let's mark this as async because, well, it's going to be asynchronous later on because we're going to be interacting with our database. So let's just do that right away. So remember, the first thing that we want to do is we want to validate our email and password. But before we do that, let's just make sure that this route is actually going to be sending back some data and it's actually connected to our root application. So over here, let's do rec res. And let's just very simply say res.send, and we can just say sign up route. Now, in order to configure these auth routes inside of our root application, what we can do is utilize app.use. So app.use. And then over here, what we can do is specify the root path. So the root path, and we can say something like /auth, and then we can specify all of the routes. So we can go in here and we can specify that. So if you were to save this, now what we can do is we can go to /auth and then /signup, and we should get back signup route. So let's actually give that a go. And one thing that I want to note is that this is a post request, so we actually can't do that inside of the browser. We're going to have to utilize a tool. A very popular tool that I always use is Postman when I'm testing my application. And so I highly recommend a tool like this if you want to test out your server-side application. So let's go ahead here, and it's a relatively easy download, honestly. It's very simple. So go ahead, install it if you can, and then now what you can do is you can go to over here, and let's actually do this from scratch. So let's delete this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new project, a new collection, and I'm going to rename this to sub app. Let me zoom in here for you guys because I'm worried that this is a little too small. So I created this. These are some other projects that I have, but I have this new project called sub app. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a request, and I'm going to change this to a post request. And so I'm going to copy this link over here. So remember, it's going to be localhost 880, and then we're going to do slash, and then we're going to do slash auth slash sign up. So if you were to hit this route, let's go ahead and send this off. We actually get back sign up route. So now we know that it is configured correctly. So now what we want to do is, of course, we want to validate our users. So let's take a quick break and we'll do that in the next section. Now that that is working, let's go ahead and let's work on these steps of the sign up route. So validating the email and the password, and then checking if the email is not already in use. So the thing is we're gonna need to somehow get the email and the password from the client to our server. And typically this is going to be sent inside of the request body. So what we can do here is we can simply extract out the email as well as the password from the request body. So let's go ahead and let's do that. So let's go ahead, and then over here, we're just going to very simply do a res.send and send back that email as well as that password. So we're going to do a rec.send email password, and it's actually better if we use res.json for this case. All right. So now let's go to where's Postman? Postman, where were you? Here we go, Postman. Let's just give this a quick little save. Let's close the other ones. Whatever, save and override, save and override. Oh my goodness, how many more of these do I have? Okay, seems like that's it. Let's just close all of these. And so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna very simply make this request again, but this time inside of the body, we are going to, I'm gonna have to zoom out here, apologies. So we're gonna have to, inside of our body, we're going to have to add something. Let me just zoom out again. So we're gonna go over here, we're gonna add raw JSON, and then we're gonna send the password and the email by having it inside of the body like so. So we're gonna have JSON email, we can say here lathharb@hotmail.com, and then we're gonna say the password is my new password. All right, let me see if I can zoom in a little bit here. Okay, this is kind of annoying, but hey, it is what it is. Maybe we can close this. I guess we can't. All right, so let's send off this request, and right now you can see that we really get nothing back. So it seems as though something has failed. And if we were to go here, it's saying, we have a type error, cannot read property of undefined. So the rec.body is actually undefined. And in order to actually make this work, what we need to do is we need to go over here and then do app.use, and then we need to do express.json. And then what that will allow us to do is to utilize the express body from this express application. So let's go ahead and let's run this request again. And now you can see here that this is how we're going to get the data from our client to our server. So this seems like it works completely fine. So let's go to auth over here. And then over here, what we want to do, the very first thing that we want to do is we want to validate, hey, is this an email or is this, is this an actual valid email? And then the password, does it fit within our range? We just want our password to be longer than 5 characters. So how are we going to validate if this is a proper email? Well, we can actually do that validation right in here. So we can do some sort of regex expression. So for example, let's go to Google right now. Let's see here, validating email, and then just say JavaScript. Okay, oh my goodness, I hate how this is Yahoo by default. Let's go here, let's paste that in, and let's go here. So there's multiple different ways. If you go to this Stack Overflow here, it's the best way to validate an email. You can see here that we can utilize this this regex expression. We can utilize this function over here. We can literally copy and paste this, and then we can just invoke this function with the email, see if it returns true or false. We could do that. But I think actually a better approach is to maybe install a very popular package that is, known for dealing with validating certain things. So the package that we're going to be utilizing is going to be Express Validator. So if you were to go to Express Validator, and as per usual, for some reason, this is Yahoo. I don't know why that is. Let's go to Express Validator here. And then we're going to utilize this package in order to validate our things. So the way that it works is over here, we're going to import these two things. And then inside of the route, in between the actual path and the handler, we're going to have, over here, these validation steps. So we're going to have something like body, and then over here, username, and we're going to make sure that this is an email. You know what, this might make a little bit more sense if we go ahead and just give this a go. So let's go and install this. So we're going to do an npm install. Let's go here. Let's close this off. Actually, wait, this is running. So let's move into our server. We're going to do npm install -- save express validator. Let's go ahead and install that. All right. So in here, the first thing that we're going to import, so we're going to import body. And what this is going to do is it's going to check the rec body, so the request body. And then we're also going to get something called validation results. So validation result, and we're going to get that from Express Validator. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Now in here, so in between the actual path and the handler, we're going to add what exactly do we want to validate. So the first thing that we want to validate is the email. So we have to make sure that inside of the body, we have something called email. And that this email thing is actually an email. So it's actually an email. So that's the first piece of validation that we want to do. Now let's just get rid of this. Now the other piece of validation is I want to validate that inside of the body, so inside of the body, we have this thing called password, and this password thing has to have a min length of 5 characters. So we can say is length, and then over here we can say the minimum length is 5 characters. All right, so now over here we've added our 2 validation steps. But this isn't going to throw an error or something if the validation is not complete. We actually have to catch the validation with validation results. So in order to do that, what we can do here is very simply go here and say const, and we can say validation errors, and we can say that that is equal to validation result, and we can pass in the request itself. And what this is going to do is it's going to return an array. So it's going to return an array of errors. So what we can actually do here is check if the validation result is not empty. So if there's actually errors inside of this array, then what we want to do is we want to throw some sort of error. So we can say here validation result, and over here we can call is empty. So we can invoke this function is empty. Or sorry, validation errors, not validation result, validation errors. So if validation errors is not empty, notice the bang over here, then what we want to do is we want to throw some sort of response saying that, hey, something is invalid here. So what we can do here is we can simply just get all of the errors from the validation error. So we can say validation errors, validation errors. We can get it as an array. And then what we can do is we want to throw some sort of response. So let's actually map through every single error. And this is of course going to be an error. And what we're going to do here is we're going to simply return, and we're going to return a message saying that, hey, you know, whatever the error.message is. So whatever the error.message is. And so over here, after we get all of these errors, we're just going to very simply do a res.json, and we are going to send back those errors for now. So let's go ahead and send back those errors. Okay, so let's just give this a quick go. Let's say I were to give it an invalid email, and I were to send this request off. You can see here that I get an array of errors. Let's say I were to also give it a too short of a password. Now you can see that we have this array of objects. We have invalid value, invalid value. Now this doesn't really mean all too much to me. So what we can do is we can also give it custom error messages. So we can say here with message. So we can say here with message, we can say that the email is invalid. And then over here we can say the password is invalid, or the password is too short. So remember what's going on here. So over here we're catching the errors, and then we're getting an array, and we're just reformatting the errors so that it sends back an object with a message and whatever that error message is. And then we're just sending it back as a response. So let's go here. Let's make this request again. And now you can see here that this is more meaningful. And now what we can do is, if we were to provide it with an actual valid password, let's go here. Let's make this request again. You can see that we actually don't hit this if block, and instead we do this. All right, awesome. We completely finished this very first step, so now let's move on to step 2. Check if the email is not already used. Now let's actually think about exactly how we're going to implement this step. So what they're going to do is they're going to give us an email, and of course we're going to validate that email that is a proper email. If we pass this step, what we're going to do is get that email and then try to fetch a particular record inside of our database that has that email. If we actually get back a record, then we want to say that, well, this email has already been used. You can't create an account with this email. However, if we get nothing back, then, well, we pass this step. So the thing is we need to connect our database to our backend in order to do this. And well, we need to create a database in the first place, because here we're interacting with our database. So what database are we using? Well, we're going to be using MongoDB. Remember, we're using the MERN stack, so the database that we're using is Mongo. Now, the MongoDB is actually relatively easy to kind of configure and set up in your application. All you need to do is go to MongoDB Atlas, and let's go over here. So MongoDB Cloud, and over here you can see try MongoDB Cloud now. And so what you can do is you can just go ahead and sign in. Now, if you sign in, you should see something like this. And you can sign in with Google or whatever it is that you want, but you should see something like this. I went ahead and I signed in with a brand new fresh account. So you can see here what is your goal today: build a new application, learn MongoDB, whatever. So you can just kind of go through this form. Let's just say build a new application. What type of application are you building? Internet of Things, I don't know. What is your preferred language? We'll say JavaScript. We can go ahead and finish. And then over here, we can pick what plan we want. Do we want the serverless, dedicated, or shared? Shared is free, so let's create shared. And then what we want to do is we want to, of course, provision our cluster. So we can utilize whatever cloud provider we want, whether it's Google Cloud or Microsoft Azure. I'm going to use AWS just because it's just the most popular. And then you want to pick a region that's closest to you. So if you live in Australia, pick Sydney. If you're in India, you can pick Mumbai. I think honestly this is the closest one to me, so I'm going to pick this one. East, yeah, this one's definitely the closest one to me. So I'm going to go ahead, and you can change your cluster name if you want to. You can call this sub app if you want. Doesn't matter. Not sun, sub app. And then you can go ahead and provision your cluster. All right, so the first thing that's going to ask you is just for some authentication credentials. So you can say your username. I'm going to say Laith Harb, and I'm going to say that my password is password. You know, a very terrible password, whatever. So let's go ahead and create this user. Password is too weak. All right, let's see here. Still too weak. All right, there we go. I don't know if I'll remember that password, but hopefully I do. Okay, cool. So now what we want to do is we want to create our database. So let's go over here. And as you can see, it's provisioning our cluster. So this actually might take a little bit of time. It might take 1 to 3 minutes to actually implement. So I'm going to pause this video and I'll be back when this is all set up. Now that we got this up and running, what we're going to do is we're going to click on connect. And then what we're going to want to do is, the first thing that we're going to want to do is add your IP. You can just pick your current IP for this and then choose a connection method. I'm going to say connect to my application. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this URI over here. So I'm going to copy this URI. Let's just quickly zoom in here. So right here, this is how we're going to connect to this specific database. So over here, this is identifying what the database is. And then over here, you can see that this is our username. And then over here, we have to supply it with the password. Now the password is the password that we set up right over here when we quick started our app. So please remember this password. All right, let's go ahead and let's connect to this database through our actual application. So let's go over here. And now let's talk about how we're going to connect to our database. In order to connect to our MongoDB database, we're going to be using a very popular package library called Mongoose. Mongoose is an ODM. If you're familiar with ORMs like Sequelize or TypeORM, Mongoose is something for MongoDB. And it's not an ORM, it's an ODM because with MongoDB we deal with documents. But it's a way that we can connect to our database, add records into our database, retrieve records, update, and delete. All right, so let's go ahead and let's actually set up Mongoose. In order to set up Mongoose, we're going to have to do that inside of our index.ts file. Now, before we do that, what I want to do is I want to go to the server and I want to create a .env file. So I'm going to create this .env file and I'm going to over here say Mongo URI. I'm going to paste in that URI that we got. And I'm going to change the password to the actual password that I created. Remember, for this user right over here. So if I remember correctly, it was password and then 123 and then exclamation mark, if I remember that correctly. I hope that's the password, but it might not be. So that's the URI, and this is how we're going to connect to our database. So inside of the index.ts file, we need to now open up our terminal because we need to install a few packages. So let's go over here. Let's make sure that we're inside. What's going on here? Let's make sure that we're inside of our server directory. And the first thing that we're going to install is Mongoose. So Mongoose is the first thing that we're going to install. And we're also going to install a package called .env. And this is going to allow our Express application to interpret what's going on with the env file. So let's go ahead and let's install both of these packages. I'm not sure if we need the types for Mongoose. If we do, we'll know that and we'll have to install it. All right, so let's go here and let's very simply just do import Mongoose from Mongoose. So we're going to import Mongoose from Mongoose, and we're also going to import. So we're going to import .env from .env. All right, awesome. So in order to actually read the stuff inside of the env file, this is why we're using the env, the .env package. And so what we're going to need to do is just very simply just do .env .config and just invoke that. That's all we have to do in order to read the environment variables inside of our env file. Okay, so that's the very first thing that we need to do. But now what we want to do is we want to connect to our application. So in order to do that, what we can do very simply is mongoose.connect. And Mongoose Connect is a method, and we are going to have to pass in the URI. Now the URI, of course, we added it right over here inside of our environment variables. So the URI is going to be process.env. And then the URI, so the Mongo URI. Now the issue that's happening here is that TypeScript doesn't know what type this is. It really doesn't know. If you hover over it, string or undefined is not assignable to type string. So what we have to say here is that this will always be defined, and it will always be a string. So you could just simply say as string. And that's just some TypeScript syntax that you don't really have to deal with when utilizing JavaScript. Okay, so now the next step is, this is going to return a callback. So this is going to, it's going to return a promise. And so what we can do here is we can have a dot then and then a dot catch. And now if something went wrong, we can just simply throw an error. So we can throw a new error. Throw a new error. Let's do error. However, so if something goes wrong, we're going to throw an error. Now, if we actually do end up connecting, let's just go ahead and console.log connected to DB or MongoDB. And then once we're connected, we actually want to go ahead and run our server. So what we can do actually is take all this and we can put it right in here. So we can actually put all of this stuff right inside of this callback. So we can go here, grab all this, and just put it inside of this callback, because we probably don't even want to start up our application if we can't connect to our database. All right, cool. So that's pretty much it. So let's just quickly go here to our server, and let's just exit out of it and let's try to rerun it again. Let's see if it works. All right, let's give it some time, and of course it crashes. So why is it crashing? All right, so I'm assuming what's happening is it's throwing an error right over here. So what we can do is we can very simply just get this error, throw this error in here. And let's also console.log the error. All right, so the error is the URI parameter to got undefined. So, okay, so that's the issue. So right now the issue is when we do process.env, where is this? When we're trying to connect here, this is actually getting us undefined. So let's see here why that is. Well, that's because we need to get this .env file and we got to put it right here. So let's try this one more time. Let's actually just try that here. Okay, cool, awesome. So now that works. So now we're connected to our MongoDB database, and now we're also listening to port 880. All right, cool. So that's terrific. So now the next thing that we have to do is we need to define how a user is going to look inside of our database. Because remember, what we're going to do is we're going to extract the email from the user, check if that already exists. But we need to define exactly how the user entity is going to look. So for example, a user is going to have an email that is a string, and a user is also going to have a password that is a string. User might have a name that is a string. Maybe if you want to add other credentials like the age or whatever, we have to define that when utilizing Mongoose. So that right there is actually a model. So what we can do here is we can create a models directory. So we can create this models directory, and inside of this models directory, we're going to create a user.ts file. And what this is going to do is it's going to define exactly how a user is going to look inside of our MongoDB database. So in order to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to import Mongoose from Mongoose. So let's import that. And we're also going to get something from Mongoose. So we're going to get something called schema. So from equal to Mongoose, we're going to get something called schema. So schema. And now what we're going to do is once we get our schema, what we can do is we can do const, and then we can say that the user schema is equal to a new schema. So we're going to go ahead and instantiate this. And this is going to take in an object. And in here, we're going to define all of the different properties that we want a user to have. For now, we're just going to define that, hey, they have an email. We're going to specify that the type is a string. We're also going to specify that, if we want to specify that we want to trim this as well. So if there's, additional space in the front of the email as well as in the back, we want to trim it. We also want to specify that this is absolutely required, so you can't create a record without this. And then we also want to specify that this is going to be unique, because we don't want to have two emails, two individuals with the same email. And now what we want to do is we want to do the password as well. So over here, what we can do is we can do type string. So over here, we can say that this is a type string. We can also add that this is going to be required because, well, you need a password if you want to create a user. And we can also add some other credentials, such as min5. So you might be thinking that, well, why are we adding these credentials if we are adding that same exact credentials inside of our auth file right over here, inside of our route? Well, this is just another form of validation. If somehow, some way that this is bypassed and it actually continues on, what we can do is we can actually validate this inside of the database level and make sure that the min is 5. So this is just another additional step for validation. All right, cool. So that's the user schema, and let's just go ahead and let's export out this user schema. So we're going to say export out, and then now to define this as a model, we're going to say mongoose dot model, and then we're going to say that this is going to be the user model, and then we're going to define the actual schema. And that's pretty much it. So that's all we have to do. Very, very simple. And so now what we can do inside of our auth file, so now finally we're coming back here, is we can actually import that. So we can import user from, we can go up a directory, we can go to, wait, where are the models? Oh, I created the models in here. Let's put that in the source directory. There we go. So now we can go up a directory, we should see the models, and then we should take this file. So now we can get this user thing. And now with this user, what we can do is we can perform multiple actions on our database. We can create a user, we can delete a user, we can do whatever it is that we want. But what I want to do is I want to find a particular user that has this email. So let's go here. What we can say is const user. And we can say user is equal to await user. Now we need to await this because this is going to be asynchronous. We're interacting with our database. This isn't going to be a synchronous request. So we're going to do user dot, and because we're using TypeScript, we're going to see all of these wonderful methods that we can utilize. And I specifically want, let's just do find one. And I want to find by what? Well, to specify how we want, what record we want to find, we can specify an object, and we can say email. So essentially here what we're saying is, well, we want the email to be the email that we get inside of this request body. Now what this is going to return is null if there is no email, but if there is an email, it's going to actually return a real record. Now right now there's nobody inside of our database, so we're not going to hit this error. But let's just go ahead and let's just simply do a res.json and return that user, just for now. So let's go ahead and let's give this a go. And let's go here. Let's do a sign up. And you can see here we get null back because there is no record inside of our database. Let's actually go ahead and create a record for now, just for kind of showing this off. So we could do user.create to do this. And then over here we can specify the email as well as the password that we get back from the body. So let's just create this user and we'll comment this out for now. We'll just comment this as just a string, or maybe we have to do a .send here. I don't know. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're just gonna simply create this user, and this user is gonna have, this email as well as this password. So I'll send this off, we get back user, everything is fine. What we can actually do is now go to our MongoDB Atlas, go to our database, click on Browse Collections, and we should be able to see this user. So you can see here, we have this document in here. Oh, I think that's too much. You can see here we have this document. So, okay, now we do have a user with this email and this password. Now, this password is bad because it's stored in plain text, but we'll fix that a little bit later. One thing that is neat is it also gives us an ID. So MongoDB gives us an underscore ID, and it is this UUID. So we don't even have to worry about adding a ID. MongoDB by default is going to give us one. All right, so now let's actually go get rid of this code. Let's go here and let's return back the user with a JSON. All right, so now if I were to send off this request again, now we actually get back this record. So we actually get back the record. So if the record doesn't exist, we're going to get back null. But if it does exist, we're going to get back this particular record. So that's really the hardest step of this step that we're taking over here with checking if the email is used or not. So simply now what we can do is we can say, hey, if we actually get back a user, what we can do is we can just simply return res.json, and we can return for now. We can return the errors. So the errors is going to be an array with one object that has a message of what is the error going to be? Oh yeah, so email already in use. And so right now what we're doing actually, and this might be a little bit confusing, we're actually just returning the errors. I think it actually might be good to return the errors and the data in the exact same JSON response. So what I mean by that is over here in the JSON response, I want to get the errors and I also want to get data. Now, if we actually get errors inside of our array, then we want initially our data to be null. Then over here, we can actually do the exact same thing. So we can say here, errors is null. Now once, data is null. Now once we actually complete all this validation step and we're completely done, we can return errors, but as an empty array, and then the data will actually have data inside of it. So let's actually just continue on now, and let's just see. So now if I try to sign up, we're getting some error. Open up our terminal just to see what's going on. Seems like everything's fine. I'm not sure. The thing is up and running. Everything is okay. If user, So let's try to send this request again. There we go. So now what we're getting is we're getting this error. Hey, this email is already in use. However, if we change this email to something else, we make the same request again. Okay, this time we get null because that's exactly what we're sending over here. But we're bypassing this. All right, so we completely finished this step 2. But now what we want to do is we want to hash the password if we actually end up saving it to the database. Because of course we don't want to save this database in plain text. If somebody got access to MongoDB Atlas, we're pretty much screwed. We're going to get sued a million times because we just exposed everybody's password. And of course we don't want to do that. The next step on our list is to hash our password. Remember, right now we're storing our password in plain text, and obviously this isn't something that we want to do. And so we want to alter our password in some way, maybe make it look a little bit more like gibberish before we store it inside of our database. So let's just quickly talk about exactly what hashing a password even is. So I'm on this really cool website. Let me just get rid of this. And this is just showing us a bunch of different hashing algorithms. So there's a bunch of these different hashing algorithms. Specifically, we're going to be using one called bcrypt, which is one of the more popular ones. But again, there's hundreds of them that do pretty much the exact same thing. And now what is it that it does? Well, let me just quickly refresh here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So what it does, what these hashing algorithms do, is you give it an input and it gives it an output. And this output is going to be hashed. So for example, if I say, I don't know, mud pie or whatever, let's just, I don't know, maybe something better. Let's just say password. So if we say password, you can see here that the hash is changing. So right now what we can say is you can say password, and then it's taking this and it's doing some sort of algorithm and is turning it into this particular hash right over here. And what's happening here, let me just quickly copy this. What's happening is we're going to take this hash and we're going to store this hash instead of actually storing the password itself. So for example, what we're going to do here is we're going to store this right here. So we're going to store this. Now, the next time that the user wants to input their password, so let's say they put in, I don't know, they put in microphone by accident, for example. Well, that's going to output this hash over here. And so what's going to happen is the algorithm is going to compare this hash with this hash, and it's going to say, no, this isn't the correct password. And one thing I want to note is this is a one-way flow. So the password is going to be hashed, but there's no way to actually get the hash and change it back to the password. And that's why hashing passwords is a lot better than encryption, where you have some sort of key that can turn it to some gibberish, but the key can also turn it back to our real plain text password. So right now, if you go back to password, then what's going to happen is it's going to take this hash, it's going to provide this hash, and then it's going to compare this hash to this hash, and as you can see, they're exactly the same, and then that means that yes, we have the correct password. Now there's some algorithms out there, hashing algorithms that don't produce the same hash for the exact same password, but they have some internal way of figuring out that yes, these two hashes belong to the very same password, so you don't have to worry about that. But the premise of this is we're going to again hash this password so really nobody can see this for additional security. All right, so I hope that makes sense. Now let's actually get right into it. So let's go over to our auth.ts, and again, we want to hash our password. Now we're not going to create the hashing algorithm ourselves. We're going to use some of the very popular hashing algorithms that are already out there. Specifically, like I said, we're going to be utilizing bcrypt. Bcrypt is one of my favorite ones. There's other ones like Argon, but again, I want to utilize bcrypt because it's by far the most popular. So let's go ahead, and of course, we're going to need to install a package, and we're going to install bcrypt.js. So let's go ahead. We're going to install bcrypt, and this is a very easy word to misspell. So let's do bcrypt.js. And let's install that. And then once that is installed, we can go ahead and import, and we can import bcrypt, so bcrypt from bcrypt.js. Now this isn't giving us, okay, it is giving us issues. So what we can do is we can simply do an npm install at types, and we can say bcrypt.js, bcrypt.js, --save--dev, just so we can get the types for this as well. All right, TikTok, there we go. Now it's happy. Okay, so now that we have bcrypt installed in our local machine, what we can very simply do is just go to over here. So after we're done the validation step, what we want to do is we want to hash the password. So we can say something like const hashed password. And we can say that that is equal to await, because this is going to be asynchronous. Dealing with bcrypt is asynchronous. We can say bcrypt.hash, and then we can provide it with the password itself. And then we can also provide it with assault rounds. So essentially assault rounds are just ways that are going to make dealing with unhashing this password a little bit more complex. It's kind of out of the scope of this course, but just take my word for it. If you want, you can research exactly what it is. Essentially what they're doing is they're taking this password, and what they're doing is by specifying we want 10 salt rounds, it's going to take this password, and then at the very end of this password, it's going to add 10 random characters. And what that's going to do is just going to make this hash be a little bit more complicated to figure out. Because right now what we can do is if we have a very common password like password, maybe some person is going to go just take all of the common passwords and then hash them and then try to make that the and try to sign in with your application. Now, if you went ahead and you just added some salt rounds to it, it will make it a lot more complicated to figure out exactly what your password is. That's basically the premise of this. All right, so now that we got our hashed password, now what I want to do is I want to create our user. So now what we can say here is we can say here const new user is equal to await. We're going to say user.create. We're going to create a user with this email that we passed in and the password, but the password not that we get in plain text, the actual hashed password. And that's pretty much it. So now that we're done that, we're kind of done this step. We're actually done both of these steps over here. So we hash the password and we save that to the database. So then the next step is actually to figure out, what we want to send back, which is the token. We'll talk about that a little bit later, of course. But for now, let's just go ahead and we're going to go ahead and save this. And let's just give this a quick go. So let's go to Postman. Postman. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to, let's see what my body says. So let's create another user, LeBron James. We're going to go ahead and send this off. And we get null back, which is, I guess, fine because that's what we're returning here. But if everything is okay, then if we go to our database, we should get another document upon refresh. And it has to have a hashed password. So let's refresh, and there we go. So we have LeBron James, and the password is completely hashed. All right, cool. And now if I were to try to send this request again, we get an error saying that, hey, this email already exists. All right, cool. So again, let's work on this very last step, sending back the token. Let's quickly understand what it is, and then we'll obviously implement it. The last thing that we need to do is send back a token once we successfully sign up to our application. Now let's talk about exactly what this token is. So this token is going to be a JSON Web Token. So let's go over here to google.com and let's very simply just search for JSON Web Token. So we're going to go here and we're going to say JSON Web Token, and then we're going to go here to JWT. And then inside of JSON Web Token, we can actually see the token that we're going to create and send back. So this token is our way of identifying who the user is inside of our client. So what we're going to do is we're going to create this token and we're going to send it to our client. And this token is then going to be sent from our client to our server with every single request that we make. And if a request is particularly authenticated, we're going to identify who this user is by checking this token. Now, how do we check this token? Well, right now, this token is made up of 3 parts, and you can see that it's actually color coded. So the header is something that you don't really have to worry about. That is okay. But the 2 things that you have to worry about is these 2 parts over here. So the second part is the payload. So when we create a token, we're going to put some information about that user, whether that's the sub, so that's the ID, the name of the user, the email of the user. We're going to add that somewhere inside of this payload. And then we're also going to have this verification signature. So we're going to create this signature using a particular key that we only have in our server. Now, once our user makes a request and sends off this token, what we're going to do is we're going to use this to verify that this is the correct JSON Web Token for our server. And then we're going to utilize the payload to check who our user is. So this is exactly what we are going to be creating and sending to our client. So let's go ahead and do this. Now, JSON Web Tokens is what we're going to be doing. So we're going to need to install JSON Web Tokens. So let's go here. Let's go to our terminal. We have so many terminal windows up and running. And then inside of our server, make sure that you are in your server directory. Remember, what we're gonna do is we're gonna do an npm install Json Web Token. So let's go ahead and do that. I don't know if you need types for this, so I usually just import the thing, JWT from Json Web Token, and I check if TypeScript yells at me. It is, so we need types for this. So we can say @types. So @types, and we can add the -dev or -save -dev flag. What's going on here? Oh, add types, not type, so types. And there we go. Now it's should be completely happy in 2 years. There we go. Okay. So now that we are completely done here, so we have our user, we created everything. So now what we want to do is we want to create our token. This is again going to be asynchronous, so we can say await and then JWT.sign. This is how we create our token. Now the first parameter that we're going to pass in is going to be that payload. So remember inside of, oh, I guess I deleted it. So remember over here, we have this payload that has some data that we want to have inside of this token. We can put whatever it is that we want. I'm gonna put in the user's email. So I'm gonna take the new user's email and I'm going to put that inside of the payload. And then what we also have to define is, well, the JWT secret that is going to make up this portion over here. So this is going to be a secret that only our server is going to know. So let's actually put that inside of our environment variables. So we can say JWT secret. And this can be just some random gibberish. So over here, some random gibberish. Okay. So let's take this secret, and over here, we're just gonna do process.env.jwt secret. Awesome. We're gonna specify that this is a string. Now what we can also do is we can also specify when this token expires. So we can do that by adding additional options. We can say something like expires in. Now this is going to be in seconds. Now I don't want this expiring for a very, very long time. So I'm just going to add some crazy number like this. But for a real application, maybe you want it to expire every, I don't know, 3 hours or a day or whatever. So let's go ahead and save this. Now what we're going to need to do, because we created a new environment variable, we're going to quickly just need to close off our server and just run it again, because we created a new environment variable. And so now what we want to do is we want to actually return back the data. So we're going to do a res.json. We're going to say errors is an empty array at this point. And then the data, what I'm going to do is send back an object that has the token that we have created. And it's going to also give us some information about the user. So we're going to get the ID, which is going to come from the user._ID. So remember, with MongoDB, everything is stored. Man, I have so many tabs open. With MongoDB, it's actually called _ID and not ID. And then, okay, we can also pass in the email, which is the user.email. And we probably don't want to send back the password. Really no point in doing that. Okay, so that's pretty much it. So that is terrific. Let's just give that a quick go. So let's try to sign up. We get an error. So we get no data. We get this. Let's change our body to somebody else. Let's change it to Kobe Bean Bryant. And then let's change our password to, why not, to hello friends. All right, so we're gonna go here, we're gonna send this off, and we get an error. All right, guys, we got an error. So let's try to debug this stupid error. Let's see what's going on here. Best way to do that is just to read what this is. So cannot read property of null, whatever. I'm not really sure what's going on here. So, oh, okay, sorry. I'm using user. I should be using new user. So we can say new user here and then new user here. Okay, so let's give this another go. Let's change the person because this already probably was created inside of our database. So let's change it to somebody else. Who can we change it to? Another basketball player. As you can see, I love basketball, guys, so I always use basketball players in my tutorials. But you know what? Let's use a female celebrity. Let's use Dua Lipa. I had somebody else yell at me for using Selena Gomez last time, so I'm going to use Dua Lipa this time. And we'll leave it as hello friends. All right, so let's go here. And there we go. So we get back our data. So we get back data, we get this token that we created, and we get this user with this ID as well as the email. And if I were to actually copy this token, so if I were to copy this token and I were to paste it inside of that site, if I were to paste it in here, so the first thing that you see is that it's invalid signature because the secret is not correct. But you can see in the payload, you can see right here in the payload, you can see that we have our email. So that's pretty neat. That's pretty awesome. Now we can actually verify this by simply going to our end file, getting this secret, and then we can actually pass that in over here. And now you can see that this signature is actually verified. All right, so that's cool. So that's really all we have to do for signing up our user, and that's pretty much authentication. So now that we finished up signing up our user, let's create a route for logging in our user. And we're just gonna do this really quickly because a lot of the concepts that we have here is gonna be relatively the same. There's just gonna be a little bit of differences with the logic. So let's do that very quickly. In this video, what we're gonna do is work on the login route. And I quickly wrote out the 3 steps that we're gonna take. So in the login route, we're gonna send back the same data from the client to the server, the email as well as the password. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to try to find that user inside of our database. If we can't find that user, then you gave us an incorrect email that doesn't correspond to any particular user inside of our database. So we're going to throw an error. We're going to tell them, hey, no, these are invalid credentials. Next, if we actually pass this step and we actually end up getting a user, what we want to do is we want to get that user's hashed password from our database and then compare it to the password that we got from our request body. Now, if, well, this comparison fails, again, we're going to say that, hey, you have invalid credentials, you can't log in. However, if it passes, then we're going to move on to this last step, and that step is just sending back that token. So we're going to go ahead and send back that token so that in subsequent requests, they can go ahead and become authenticated. So this is really easy. Let's just do it in one quick go. So let's go here. Now in here, we have a post request for sign up. Let's create another post request for signing in or for logging in. So we're going to say router.post. Very simply, we're going to say log in. We're going to say rec_res. And there's actually no need to validate the password and the email. If they give us a password of one character, then whatever, that's fine. We're just going to check it inside of our database, see if it exists, and then if it doesn't, we're just going to throw an error. Because we probably don't want to do any of these validations here anyways, because maybe our password validation steps changes as we go along, and thus maybe we might have users inside of our database, legacy users inside of our database, or old users inside of our database with password criteria that don't meet what we have over here. So we don't want to do any of that validation. So the first thing that we want to do, of course, is we want to get the email and password. So let's get this email and password from the request body. So from the request body. And then what we want to do is we want to get the user. So we want to say user is await user.find one. And we're going to pass in that email. Now, if we can't find that user, then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and return res.json. And we're going to say errors is going to be this errors array. And then in here, we're going to have a message of invalid credentials. We could say that this user doesn't correspond to, this email is invalid or whatever, but I think it'll be better to be as generic as possible. And then over here, we can say that the data is null. All right, cool. So that's pretty cool. what's going on here with the issues? I don't know what's going on here, to be honest. Return res.json. Expected 0 to 1 arguments, but got 2. What? I am confused, guys. What is this? The error doesn't even seem like it's going away. Oh, because this should be an array. There we go. That fixes that. And then over here, yeah, so that fixes this. So that's very quick. And now what we want to do is, okay, if we pass this step, then what we want to do is we want to compare the password. So we can simply do something like const is match. So we can do is match. And we can actually use bcrypt for this. So we can use bcrypt.compare, and we can compare the password that we get back to the hash password that we got from the user. So we can simply say user.hashedPassword, or sorry, user.password, not hash password. And now if this is either going to return true or false, so we're going to say, you know what, if this is false, we can just simply return the exact same thing. We're just not going to say that this password is invalid. We're just going to simply say invalid credentials. There we go. Now, if we pass both of these steps, then, well, we're pretty much done at this point. So now let's create our token. Let's actually go ahead and just copy this code here. Let's copy this because it's going to be exactly the same. So we're going to go here. We're going to create our token, except this time we're going to use user. So we're going to create the token, and then very simply we're going to go ahead and just return res.json errors of an empty array, and then the data, we're going to have the token, and then we're going to have the user. We're going to have the user ID. So the ID is going to be user_ID, and then the email is going to be user.email. That's it. Really, really simple. I hope this makes sense, because what we're doing here, I went through this relatively fast. But again, what we're doing here is validating if the user even exists with that particular email in our database. We're checking if now we're comparing the hash password to the password that we get back. And if all these work, then what we're going to do is we're going to return this token. Okay, so let's go here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this route. I am going to add another request. And what I can also do here is rename this to sign in, so I know exactly what it is. And over here, I can rename this to login. And now I can go back to sign in. Let's copy this. And now I should be able to do login. And then in here, inside of here, let's provide it with, just provide it with like a gibberish email for now that doesn't exist in our database. Just provide it with a whatever password. So if I were to send this request, it fails. We get a 404. The reason for this is because, why is it that we get a 404? I'm kind of confused. Let's see. Basically, it's just not finding that particular request. /auth/login. Well, what do we call this? Oh, I have to change this to a post request. All right, you can see here that we're getting invalid credentials. So that's good. So now let's go back here. And what do we add here? So Dua Lipa. So this is an actual user now. So this is an actual user. If we were to send this off, we still get invalid credentials because now we know that our the password is incorrect. So the password here is hello friends. We can pass that in now. And now look at that. We get back our token. Awesome. So in terms of authentication, we're completely done on the backend side. So there's going to be a little bit of modifications that we're going to do along the way, but most of 99% of the logic is completely done in the backend side. So now let's actually start using these routes inside of our front end.